Hey there, art nerds. Today I am on the hunt for a decent charcoal watercolor. I'm going to be taking a look at two different options today, although there are more available on the market. So we're starting with the Derwent charcoal watercolor paint pan set, and then we're going to finish up with the Schmincke Kohl watercolor paints. I've got 3 of them and one of these. Gee, I wonder which one's better. Let's go ahead and unbox and swatch these watercolors to find out. There, art nerds, we've talked about Derwent's Inktense products quite a bit here on the channel. So today we have something both a little different and very much the same. Today we're checking out the Derwent Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan Set. And this is a paint pan set. We've checked out several of the Derwent paint pan sets in the past, including the Graphitint paint pan set. More on that in a little bit. What really makes this different is, in general, I don't really like charcoal. I used it a lot in undergrad for, drawing fundamentals and figure studies, but I'm one of those artists who, if it ends up on my hands, it's gonna end up on everything. So typically, I don't really use charcoal. What drew me to this, though, it is a water-soluble charcoal. So theoretically, I don't have to ever get my hands dirty if I don't want to, which is pretty exciting for me. So when we talked about the Graphitint paint pan set, I was a little underwhelmed by the amount of colors these brought. I just felt like the color intensity wasn't really what I was looking for. It wasn't really as intense as I'd hoped. I was really kind of hoping for something similar to, but not exactly like, the Van Gogh Dusk colors. I was also hoping these would be erasable, because I thought it'd be really cool to be able to do watercolor washes with these and then be able to erase out highlights. They didn't really deliver on either front. In fact, for the field test, I actually ended up doing an underpainting with, I believe, the original Derwent Inktense watercolors, so that I could get, that intensity of color, and then I kind of glazed my Graphitint colors on top of that. And I'll link that for you guys so you guys can check it out. Now, the two of them together, at the time I painted this, I was actually pretty disappointed with how it turned out, but several months have passed and I actually really like it. So isn't that funny how art is like that sometimes? But me, Boo Boo the Clown, the ever hopeful fool, is hoping that the Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan set will really be something unusual, something new to add to my art, and will add a lot of granulation and visual interest. So I'm really excited to dive into this and unbox and swatch it and possibly field test it. Depending on how this goes, I may do an unbox, swatch, and field test all in one for you guys. But regardless, I'm excited to swatch these at the very least today. Derwent has a few of these paint sets available. There's also a pastels one that I'm kind of interested in. Most of them utilize the same palette. With the Inktense paint pan set, there are actually 2 different sets, and you can get it as a 24 color set as well now. But basically, they all kind of use this format, where very similar to like the Sakura Koi or the Shapira Farben set, where we have these removable cartridges in a plastic palette. I found the Inktense watercolors to be a little bit, watercolors, they're actually India ink, to be a little underwhelming. I'm a big fan of Inktense watercolor pencils. I talk about them here on the channel a lot, but these just didn't really have the luminosity or the liveliness or the granulation that I was kind of hoping for. And I had hoped for better with the Graphitints, not really so much. So generally these sets come with 12 watercolors, a water brush, and a sponge. Sometimes they come with a swatch card of sorts, but they're all in the same plastic housing. So I guess once Derwent kind of develops a formulation and they can find somebody, or they're able to produce these in half pan form, it's pretty easy to roll out a whole new product utilizing what they've already got going on for them. So hopefully I will like these. better than these two. But if you like any of these, if your opinion differs from mine, let me know very nicely. Be gentle with me down in the comments below. So while I'm unboxing it, I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself in case you're new. I am a watercolor comic artist, so my main focus is watercolor comics and watercolor illustration. So when I'm reviewing water-based and watercolor products, I'm usually looking at it through the lens of comics and illustration. So I'm kind of hoping these could be great for like moody, more monochromatic sort of things. And I've been really getting into super granulation stuff, so I'm also kind of hoping for some of that. All right, so we have, all these colors look like the same color. This is gonna be interesting. We have 12 of these in a white, and that white is already looking dirty, so that doesn't really bode super well. I think they're all supposed to be different colors. This doesn't really look like it's all different colors, but that could just be the printing. It's been wrapped, and they already seem kind of dusty, which is to be expected from charcoal. There is also a sponge in here. The sponge is for you to clean off your water brush. I'm not a big water brush person, so I'm really just gonna focus on the paints today. And we're gonna free them from their confines. There we go. All right, there is our Derwent Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan set. So the box reads, Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan Set, water-soluble, unique blend of charcoal with hints of color. Enjoy the inimitable quality of charcoal art with a twist. Derwent's uniquely formulated tinted charcoal paints are water-soluble. Adding just a hint of color to the charcoal base, this palette of 12 deep muted tones provides a high level of creative control with a white pan for highlighting. That gonna turn to mud. Each color quickly and easily mixes, creating atmospheric and expressive results with a matte textured finish. Blend colors wet, apply in later layers and lift, smudge or draw over when dry. This compact self-contained set contains 12 tinted charcoal paint pans, 5 mixing palettes, and that's these up here. They're just molded into the container. And a sponge to clean the mini water brush included. And these are made in Great Britain. So the colors in this set are Dark Moss, Forest Pine, Driftwood, Mountain Blue, Ocean Deep, Thistle, Glowing Embers, Burnt Earth, Natural Dark, and White. And we are going to be swatching today using a regular watercolor brush. I'm going to grab a silver black velvet brush from my stash. I'm going to be using filtered water because obviously I want to give these the best chance possible. And I am going to be swatching on Blick Studio Cotton Rag watercolor paper. I don't think I'm going to bother doing opacity tests with these. I'm going to handle these a lot like how I handle super granulating watercolors. I'm going to go ahead and spritz these with water just to give them a chance to pre-activate, just because some products just do a lot better that way. I have my silver black velvet brush over here. I have my Blick pad over here. I've also got a black Copic that we're going to use to test out our white watercolor a little bit later. Our white charcoal. Might be a type of chalk. We're going to find out. That's going to be kind of interesting. So what I want to kind of test with the, boy, they absorbed all that water. Look how dry, they're charcoal, Becca. That's why they're so dry. So we're going to do swatches. I'm going to try to do some layering with them. I'm going to try to maybe lift them up. We're just going to play around with these quite a bit to really get a feel for them. Just because since they are a charcoal product, I figure they're probably different from anything I've really used in the past. These seem to need a lot of scrubbing to get something approaching a saturated color. They're not nearly as dark as the provided swatches, but you can actually see some color to them, which I assume is the included Inktense pigments. And that would make them somewhat indelible, which is not what we're really hoping for today. They're still moody and kind of pretty. I just wish that the darker tones had more oomph to them. Maybe I'm doing this wrong. These aren't even dry yet. They don't even have to be. It seems like it takes a lot of scrubbing to get anything nearly approaching a saturated color. And they're not nearly as dark as the swatches. I mean, look y'all, it's like night and day compared to the swatches, right? Like the swatches are all pretty dark. You could see these as being the darkest value for a charcoal color. These are all very light and I really scrubbed, but you can actually see some color to them, at least to some of them, like some of the greens, the blue, the purple. Then these are in the brownish category. Some of these are really moody and kind of pretty, but I do wish that they had darker tones that we could start out with and we could then blend that out. I kind of feel like maybe I'm doing this wrong because even though I pre-activated it and respritzed it and scrubbed it, I'm just like not getting anything out of some of these, and that's kind of concerning. Usually with these reviews, especially for something that's like a water-based or a watercolor-esque product, other than reading the box and anything they might include in the box with explanations for how to get started, I just assume it's going to be like regular watercolor and I handle it like regular watercolor. So I feel like I need to kind of look up how to use these and maybe we can get a little bit more oomph out of them. As it is, like the idea is interesting. I actually like that there's some granulation going on. I think they're getting the color from Inktense. That's a good use together, but I cannot get these moving. Another thing, I'm on the Derwent website. They on their site, the MSRP is $40. $40 for this. I know I bought it on Blick. I'm gonna go grab the price for you guys. I would not pay $40 for this, and I don't recommend that you guys do either. I was just, whoo, for something that doesn't even activate, that is a steep price tag. On the listing, they have a video with one of their brand ambassadors, and I was just kind of scrubbing through. It's only 44 seconds long, and he can get some dark color, but it also kind of looks like he went in with the Derwent pencils, and it's not really clear when he's switching between the two, and he never actually demonstrates how to get this thing here dark. So I'm gonna keep digging, but man, was this something that like all of y'all just didn't like and it was not very good and I'm just late to the party? Is that what's been going on? Some of the swatches I'm seeing online are a little weak, not as weak as these. Some of the swatches I'm seeing online are really nice and saturated. I'm not really getting how to get more out of these than what I'm already doing. And this set isn't actually that old. It did sit for a little while, but it's not like a year old. It's like 6 months old. So I'm gonna keep pushing it. Maybe it's had like a layer that oxidized. Maybe I need a stiffer brush. You know, I'll keep trying. I'm kind of disappointed because it seems like people like it, and it's like, well, y'all are having great experiences and it's so promising, and I really like the moody colors, but it is just not delivering right now. So I respritzed it. I'm gonna go get a stiffer brush. We're gonna give it another shot. So I checked online and it seems like others are able to get much darker effects, although some of the swatches are still kind of light. So I tried switching to a stiffer synthetic brush, and while that did help, dark is still kind of weak. I was expecting like black. These definitely seem like they're a combination of Inktense and a little bit of charcoal, and that makes me wonder why they're so hard to activate. Okay, so see there, we learned something. You need a stiffer brush for this, maybe even one for acrylics, because softer watercolor brushes are just really not going to do a whole lot with these. So at the very least, you want to maybe be working with like a synthetic, something that can kind of scrape up that charcoal. So I said I wasn't going to test opacity, but some of these are looking like really weirdly opaque. And I mean, that's like an Inktense kind of thing, is they have a tendency to be opaque despite it saying that they're going to be more transparent. That's kind of the India ink. So I have a quick Copic line. I'm going to give that a chance to kind of evaporate and dry out, and I'm going to swatch them all across the line so we can actually see how opaque they are. Obviously, we know the white is opaque. It's meant to be opaque. It's meant to be kind of like a white chalk, kind of like an additive on top. Some of these definitely seem to have a bit of opacity to them and stand out against the black line rather than blending in with it. This points to the inclusion of Inktense, since Inktense has a tendency to be kind of opaque. Some of these definitely seem to have a bit of opacity to them and stand out on the black line rather than kind of blending in. That points to the inclusion of Inktense, since Inktense has a tendency to be kind of opaque. So next, I wanted to try these out on a cheaper cellulose paper, not because I think they're going to really perform better, but I think they might be a little bit easier to blend and smear on a cheaper paper because cotton rag tends to keep its secrets. For my cheaper paper test, I am going to use the Dora Art watercolor pad, mostly because it's block bound and partially because I might consider doing my field test on this. And I'm going to have to use a stiffer brush to get anything out of these at all. So I'm going to go grab a larger synthetic brush and kind of think about what I want to do with this, because this could be a good chance for me to try my layering test as well. So I decided to do a few layers and try to create kind of a moon effect on our cheaper Dora Arts cellulose watercolor paper. Brush strokes, especially with a lighter wash, are really apparent, so you might want to use a mop or something after mixing up your paint. This is a little bit disconcerting for me. In this sort of wet into wet application, I really don't want to see the brush strokes. I have painted on this pad of paper before. I've also used alcohol markers on this pad before, and this is kind of a more unique to the Graphitin / Derwent rather than something that I've seen with other paints. So I'm going to chalk this up to the paints themselves rather than the pad of paper. As you guys can see, I did do several layers, and while it is capable of layering, you can see that kind of chalkiness from the Inktense pigments kind of building up in some areas but not in others, which makes a smooth, even wash kind of challenging with these paints. So as of right now, I've got some serious misgivings about these. I really want to like them, but the saturation issues and the opacity issues are just kind of a deal breaker for me. Hey, if anybody else makes charcoal-based watercolors that you guys know of, send them my way, because I feel like I would really like the concept. It's just that there are some issues with Inktense, you know, with the opacity, and then some issues with actually getting to activate and have any kind of saturation at all that are kind of killing it for me. So I'm going to let this dry for 12 hours and then get back to testing it out. So this is dried for more than 12 hours. I'm going to try erasing and also smudging. So, you know, I know a lot of people would use kneaded erasers for this. I'm not a big kneaded eraser person myself, so I don't really have a lot of them around. I'm a big white vinyl eraser person though, so that's what I've got, so that's what I'm going to use. Yeah, I guess. I can't tell if it's actually erasing or abrading. We'll find out in a moment when I use my drafting brush to remove the schmutz. It's going to be less noticeable with the lighter colors. Kind of going for like a moon thing here with this test, because why not? Yeah, some erase better than others. And I mean, frankly, and this is just based on my experiences, your mileage may vary, I have found that white vinyl erasers tend to be a little bit, not more abrasive, but a little bit more likely to pick stuff up than kneaded erasers. Kneaded erasers are great for like lifting just a little bit or gently lightening something, whereas white erasers are really good for like cleanly erasing an area. So I kind of figure if it's barely picking it up at all, then it's probably a kneaded eraser. Sorry, it's probably not going to do too much. Yeah. It does actually smudge some. Not a whole lot, but some. And I'm sure some of you guys are like screaming in the comments about how I'm not using cotton rag paper for this and how a cotton rag paper would be better. I went with the cellulose because I figured everything would sit on top. So it would be the most apparent if we could erase and the most apparent if we could smear. So a little bit of erasing and not a whole lot of smudging. So I'm gonna go back to our original, kind of falling apart mostly because I'm on the last 2 pages, Blick Studio block, and we'll do the wet into wet test next. Although, to be real, for the wet into wet test, the color payoff is so weak, I really don't think I'm gonna see a whole lot of anything that we haven't already seen here. And this is really kind of frustrating because in general, it seems like people are getting a lot of color, or a lot of charcoal payoff, and they seem to really like this set. And in theory, I love the ideas behind this set. I wish this set actually worked for me. I wish I could get it to work for me. If I'm doing something wrong, if I need to like abrade it with sandpaper because maybe it developed a film on the top or something, let me know down in the comments because I really want to like this set. I think the idea behind it is really cool. Those of you who've watched for a long time, you guys know I actually really like moody colors. Like I like the Boku Undo Sumi-esque colors, and I like the Van Gogh Dusk colors, and I really like super granulation stuff as well. So theoretically, I should love this. And theoretically, this set does what the Graphitint set doesn't do, namely erase, which would have been super cool, and smear. The Graphitint set, it's pretty much like once it's on that paper, it's on the paper. With the cotton rag watercolor paper, I was really hoping we could get some smoother, more misty techniques since it's designed to hold more water, but I still noticed they were kind of scrubby. Not as scrubby as they were on the cellulose paper, but still disappointingly scrubby. And I think it's because it's just so difficult to pick up any pigment and it's difficult to kind of get it to disperse. This is a set that I'm just really not digging. I really like the concept. I feel like it was a fun idea, but the execution is really disappointing. Fortunately, there are other charcoal watercolors on the market, and I am going to explore the Schmincke ones a little bit further in today. But thank goodness, this is not the only game in town, and some of them do seem to perform a lot better than this particular set. I've got a couple layers on here, and I could like keep belaboring the point, but I don't think it's really going to help. I really, and I've said this like 8 times by now, I really want to like these. I really like the concept. I think that's really neat. I would enjoy, you know, playing around with it. It's charcoal in a way that's definitely a little bit easier on somebody like me. I don't have to worry about getting my hands dirty and then getting everything in my life dirty. But I really want to be like, where is the charcoal? Where is the charcoal? Where is the saturation? Where is the moodiness? Where is the depth? We do get some granulation, which is cool because with Inktense, we don't really get much granulation at all. But with my set, I'm not getting anything. And from other people online, it seems like they're having a better experience with this. So maybe I got a weird set. I don't really know, you know? I don't know anyone else in person who also has this set that I could try theirs out and see, like, maybe mine got damaged sitting for a while. I mean, it sat in a climate controlled house, but you know, art supplies don't last forever. I would just be really surprised if they died that quick. So I'm kind of bummed out about it because I really want to like it. I really like the idea behind it, but I just can't get them to work. You guys saw me scrubbing with the brushes to the point where I have all these like bubbles in my art from how much I try to whip up some charcoal. So I don't know, maybe I got a bad set. You guys let me know. If you guys have tried the set and had better experiences, let me know. And maybe let me know what you did differently. If anything, if you guys had the same experience, let me know so that I don't think I'm crazy. But it just seemed kind of promising. I really kind of wish they'd gone heavier on the charcoal and lighter on the color, because with mine, you can see that like intense opacity that I really don't want. So my verdict for the Derwent Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan set. So far, not so good. Other people's experiences do seem better, so I'm willing to hold my judgment and assume that possibly I'm handling them wrong or that my paints degraded while they sat. But if this is how they handle, I really don't understand why Derwent didn't put more charcoal in these and less Inktense, because I want that depth. I want that drama, and I really wanted to like these. As someone who has used charcoal a lot in my undergraduate years, I really did not like how I loved how it looked, but I didn't like getting it all over myself, all over my clothes, all over the place. Look, I'm just a messy person. And I thought that this could be like a beautiful best of both worlds where I could get a lot of the prelim stuff done with these charcoal paints. And then if I wanted to, I could use willow charcoal or charcoal pencils to go in and add some really deep additional drama. Unfortunately, I can't get any saturation out of these, and what saturation I am able to get takes a tremendous amount of scrubbing, struggling, and introducing air bubbles. Now, they do, to an extent, do what they promise. I can erase them, which was pretty impressive, and I can smear them, which is also impressive, especially because they do contain Inktense in them, and Inktense, being India ink based, tends to be indelible once it's had a chance to dry, which means no smearing and no erasing. So the fact that I can pick any of it up is actually pretty impressive to me. But I really wish at least my set had more charcoal and could deliver that really interesting drama and granulation that we're able to get from charcoal. I also thought the formulation for this set would be a little bit different because there are different types of charcoal. You've got vine charcoal, you've got willow charcoal, you've got different hardnesses, you've got different intensities. I was thinking that this would be less reliant on the Inktense to vary the color and the handling of the charcoal, and more just different types of charcoal used to kind of create that variety with maybe 1 or 2 tints in there. And some of the tints are pretty similar. Both Ember and Burnt Ember are really close to one another. So adding that variety of different types of charcoal would make it more interesting. Now, maybe Derwent did that. I couldn't find it in any of their literature on their website, but sometimes companies do things and they don't disclose everything to us. So if you guys know if that's something that they did and that my criticism there is unfounded, let me know that as well. I'm pretty disappointed in the Derwent Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan set. It just doesn't really do what I want it to do. So I did a little bit of digging and I found on St. Louis Art Supply that Schmincke makes some coal or liquid charcoal watercolors, and I actually talked about this in my St. Louis Art Supply haul video. But there are things I like about charcoal watercolors that I think are interesting, that I figured it was worth it to try a better brand with a different formulation to see if maybe this is able to deliver kind of what I had in mind. Because those of you who watch the channel know I love me some moody atmospheric watercolors, and this could be a great way to get that kind of moody atmospheric effect. So I have 2 smaller 5ml tubes. 2 of them are Cherry Pit Black and Peach Stone Black. St. Louis Art Supply was sold out of the 3 set in this size and was sold out of the smaller version of Grapeseed Black. So I have the larger Grapeseed Black here. And these are all made from different kinds of charcoal. This is made with PBK 8. Let me see if I can find what this one's made out of. I'd be kind of disappointed if I couldn't, because that means I gotta dig. I think I'm gonna have to dig. Yay! Oh, nope. PBK8 as well. And then PBK8. So I guess the PBK8 refers to charcoal, not what type of charcoal. But there are different types of charcoal. I was kind of also looking to see if they might have had willow charcoal, because different types of charcoal have slightly different kinds of tints to them. But no willow, at least not on St. Louis Art Supply. So at least this one has a little bit of information on it. For different types of charcoal work, e.g. drawing to painting, natural pigment made of careful carbonization of grape seeds with a gum arabic base without animal ingredients and dilutable with water. It is both vegan and natural. So I guess this would fall into, eventually, I've been slowly collecting plant dye-based and plant-based watercolors just to kind of show you guys. I think that's really cool. It kind of ties in with some of my other interests. Just as I enjoy geology, I do enjoy botany. So this actually would fall very neatly into that. So you guys will be seeing these again, and honestly, you'll be seeing them again if I like them. I'm really hoping they will not have the issues that I had with the Derwent set. So this isn't just a review of the Derwent paint pan set. This is also a review of the Schmincke Kohl liquid charcoal watercolors. So the grapeseed black is $7.55, the cherry pit black is $7.56, and the peach stone black is $7.57. All of them have 5 stars of light fastness, which is not at all surprising. It is charcoal. Charcoal is pretty dang light fast. And I believe carbon black is very similar to charcoal, but I think, and I'm gonna have to double check this, so take this with a grain of salt until I have a chance to Google it. I think carbon black is made from charred animal bones, and I think lamp black used to be made from the soot that comes from lighting like a kerosene lamp. So we've been using sort of charcoal-based pigments for a really long time. They're some of our first pigments outside of natural earth pigments, so I think they're pretty cool. All right, so I had a chance to do a little bit of digging, and I also misspoke. So I will address where I misspoke first, and then we'll talk about the digging that I did. So I was actually thinking of ivory black, which is made from charring bones or waste ivory. It was used in prehistory and is still in use today. So it is the least pure form of carbon black, containing a high percentage of calcium phosphate. And that information came from the Pigments Through the Ages website, which seems really cool, and I'll link that for you guys. Carbon black is a very common ingredient in manufacturing, and it's made in a variety of ways, and subtypes are acetylene black, channel black, furnace black, lamp black, and thermal black. So I guess carbon black can refer to kind of this massive category, and then we have our subsets regarding how it was made. But it's a material produced by the incomplete combustion of heavy petroleum products such as fluid catalytic cracking tar, coal tar, ethylene cracking tar, or vegetable matter. And that came from Wikipedia. So just wanted to kind of clarify that because I misspoke a little bit earlier. So these two are not the only liquid charcoal or watercolor charcoal products on the market. Grumbacher makes a charcoal gray, Turner makes a charcoal watercolor. Often you'll see like peach stone black, carbon black, ivory black in your watercolor kits. Those are also charcoal-esque watercolors, maybe not exactly charcoal, but they're still in the carbon black family. And Artgraph also makes charcoal water-soluble artist chalks. I think if you guys way back recall, those of you who have hung out with me for a really long time, you guys remember that I took a look at Artgraph's artist chalks or Taylor chalks. Those are pretty cool. And they also make this like graphite putty that's pretty neat, but that's something that really requires you getting handsy with it, and you guys know I hate getting that kind of stuff on my hands, because once it's on my hands, it ends up all over everything. So much like with our Derwent watercolors, I am going to be swatching on Blick cold press watercolor paper. And since this is a twofer today, I would be doubly remiss if I didn't thank my patrons, because it is their support over on Patreon that enables me to buy the supplies that I review and show you guys how to use here on the channel. So we don't have any other outside sponsors besides my comic, 7-Inch Kara, which you can read for freezies at 7inchkara.com, and my amazing patrons on Patreon. So if you like what I do, you can join them today and help me continue to do this thing that I do. So we only have 3 colors to test, so this shouldn't take too long. Hopefully I will like these a lot better than a, oh boy, that is a lot bigger. Look at this difference. I don't need all this, but look at this difference. You got your little bitty baby, and then you got the big old parent. So all of these should be pretty easy to access. It'll be interesting to see if I can put these into half pans and reconstitute them. Maybe I should do that first. I'm going to start out by swatching fresh from the tube. I'm going to fill these whole pans, not half pans this time, with our 3 colors. We are working with Grapeseed Black, Peach Stone Black, and Cherry Pit Black. All 3 contain PBK 8, which is made using carbon black. So these are all charcoal-based watercolors, hence the coal in their name. So they go into the whole pans pretty easily, no weird gum Arabic, no weirdness whatsoever, and straight from the tube, I already like these better than the Derwent Tinted Charcoal watercolors. They have better saturation, they have interesting colors without the need to add other pigments. So this is already way more what I was looking for when I'd heard about charcoal-based watercolors. I had to work with charcoal a lot in undergrad, and I hated getting it all over my hands, and this would have been a fun alternative that would have allowed me to cover large areas easily without as much waste. These swatches have had a few hours to dry, so I have some other tests I want to try out. First, we're going to try erasing. And I'm using a white vinyl eraser. I know often with charcoal you would use a kneaded eraser. It does not seem like it will pick it up. So these are not going to erase. Let's try smearing, and my hands are super dry, but they smear a little bit, but not a whole lot. I wonder, I don't have this is kind of a dry, this is a dry enough watercolor brush. They don't seem to smear or brush out, so it seems like once the charcoal is on the paper, whatever the binder is going to hold it fast. So if you are looking for something that can be applied as like a wash and then lifted back out or erased like you would with regular charcoal, these are probably not it. So next I want to try re-wetting it to see if it reactivates, and then I'm going to try just plain lifting it. The difference between the two is with re-wetting it, I want to see if I can reactivate it. And then with lifting it, I want to see how much it actually lifts. Now it does look, just from me trying to reactivate it, and that's me gently wetting it and encouraging it to move. It does reactivate a little bit, but it mostly just lifts. So these are going to be, some colors are more reactivatable than others, like our darkest black here, which would probably be the Cherry Pit Black. That does seem like it would be very prone to reactivating, and that's important to know in case you want to use this as like a base layer and you wanted to paint some color on top of it. How likely is it to move? And then, so yeah, you guys can see these are going to be very lifting. So if you did want to lift back out rather than erasing, you could use a really small brush and just pick your highlights back out, which is cool. At least we have that as an option. That is not really an option with the Derwent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let these dry in their whole pans for about a week, and then we're going to check and see if they can reactivate and how they compare with the fresh from tubes, because not all watercolors work well once you've allowed them to dry out. So I allowed my half pans to, or whole pans, sorry, slip of the tongue, force of habit. I allowed them to dry for a week, and I'm putting them in this little storage tin just to kind of keep things handy and to keep them all together. I will field test these later on. I have some fun ideas for them, but we're not going to do that in today's video because we've already gone on long enough. So it's been a week, more than a week actually, because I've been kind of under the weather and haven't felt up to doing voice recording. And they're pretty dry, they're pretty hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna spritz them with water, give them a chance to reactivate, and we will see how well these reactivate from whole pans. So I'm gonna let this sit for about a minute since it is charcoal and charcoal is kind of thirsty, and give it a chance to kind of soak in, reactivate that binder, and kind of let those pigments loosen up. Okay, so let's see how well these reconstitute. So I'm basically gonna recreate the same tests. Looking good so far. Good saturation. Reconstituted pretty easily. Blended out pretty easily. So far, so good. In a way, even though I didn't like the Derwent charcoal, whatever it is, I want to call it Inktense because it contains Inktense, but it has a different name. I'm glad I tried them because it kind of turned me on to charcoal-based watercolors, which it shouldn't be surprising that I'd like them or that that's a common pigment to use, but it does kind of open up the world to more plant-based watercolors in a way that actually works and in a way that we're already familiar with. I found that all three colors re-wet and rework quite easily, so if you would prefer to work with them from dried whole or half pans, they will allow you to do that. That is my preference. It's just easier since I've got a cat rather than working from tubes. It's also more compact and easier for travel. I'm really pleased to see that these reactivate just as well, if not maybe a little bit better than they did when they were fresh from the tube. I was concerned at first because with some watercolors like Daniel Smith's Mayan Blue, they don't dry out and then reconstitute so well. With Mayan Blue, it basically just turns into a dried out lump of Mayan Blue clay. But with these, we're able to reactivate them and it doesn't really seem to take much scrubbing and it doesn't really seem to be much of a struggle. So that means that if you're like me and you prefer to work from whole pans and half pans, or if you're a plein air painter, this could be a great way to kind of economically transport your charcoal-based watercolors without a lot of wastage. Because I find that when I work from half pans, I waste less paint than when I'm working directly from the tubes. So what are the pros and cons of the Schmincke Kohl watercolors? So the pros. These don't smear like charcoal, so you may not have to be as careful with these as you would with stick or compressed charcoal. They reactivate well from half pans and whole pans. The colors get really dark and saturated while still maintaining some color and characteristic. And the colors lift easily, so you can lift out areas of light. And the 5 milliliter tubes are an affordable way to play around with these and see if you even like them. What about the cons? They don't smear like charcoal, so the types of blending techniques that you might already be familiar with or you might want to use aren't really an option with these. They also don't erase or lift with a traditional eraser, so that's also not one of your options. And if you can't get the little 5 milliliter tubes to try, they can be pretty expensive because your options, at least on St. Louis Art Supply, are the 5 milliliter tubes, which sell out, and the 35 milliliter tube, which is much more of an investment, and that's a lot of charcoal paint if you don't like it. So what's my verdict for the Schmincke Kohl? I like these, and I'm definitely going to do some monochromatic field tests with these, but that's going to be another video. So what is my overall verdict comparing the Derwent Tinted Charcoal Paint Pan Set against the Schmincke Kohl watercolors? So if you want charcoal effects or charcoal-based watercolor, skip this. As you guys can see, there's just not, while there's color to it, since they are tinted, and we do get that Inktense tinting going on here, there's not a lot of charcoal here. And they just don't handle the way I would want them to handle, which is a reoccurring theme when it comes to these Inktense based products. They just don't handle really like watercolors. I just can't do with them what I would do with watercolors, and I can't really get the kind of depth and saturation or transparency that I might get from watercolors. So maybe this is just not a good fit for me, period. However, I did really like the Schmincke Kohl watercolors. I found that they did everything I wanted them to do. I was delighted with what I was able to achieve. Yes, it is mostly black. It's different shades of black though, which is what I was really looking for. And we definitely get that charcoal saturation that I was hoping to see, that I had wanted to see here, and that the packaging and that a lot of the demos for these show. Maybe I just got a bad set, because from just kind of quick Googling to see what other people can do with this, it either seems like they get exactly what I got, but they're happy with it, so good for them, or they're able to get those really rich, intense charcoals. Now, what I think is going on here, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, so I'm gonna adjust it so you guys can see. I believe that they did use the tinted charcoal paint pan set on this to some capacity, but I also think that they used traditional charcoals and some of their other charcoal products as well. And I think they were able to get the really white whites and the really dark darks, so basically all of the contrast, by utilizing those other products. And I assume, just based on my experiences, that those light washes in the background, that is what is actually the paint pans were used to do. So all of this color intensity is coming from another product, not from that. And this is just based on my experiences with this product. I could be totally wrong and I could be misusing it, but this is a bit of a pet peeve for mine, because I have a friend who used to do product art for a major Japanese stationery distributor based in California, and they are a phenomenal artist. One of my problems with that company was that they were not always honest about who was making what art. They would often stage the art that my friend had done with somebody else's hands, because my friend's hands just weren't pretty enough, which, as someone who doesn't have pretty hands, I kind of am like about that. So a lot of companies don't really have a problem divorcing the art from the artist, hiding the artist's name, basically making it seem like art comes out of the ether. And I think an art supply company or an art supply vendor, I feel like there's an ethical problem there, because like, you're selling art supplies to artists and aspirational artists, right? Why would you detach the art from the person who created it? Doesn't that just ring hollow for what you're trying to do? So here we have some art. As I flip the packaging around, I am not seeing any sort of mention of the artist's name. I'm also not seeing the art signed by the artist, like it might have been cropped to not show the signature. And as someone who has done art and work for hire for like children's toy companies and for stationery companies like Cards, I understand the difference between work for hire, where you're mass producing art that's going to be repackaged and resold and they don't want to credit the original artist, with companies that make art supplies not crediting the artist. I think those are very different things. And I do have a problem with that. And this kind of circles back, because since we have divorced the art from the artist, we don't have any explanation of what materials were used. We don't have any explanation for the techniques that were used. We don't even 100% know that this illustration was painted with these, just based on the information provided here, which I actually think companies should include that as part of their packaging. I mean, they can promote their own brand 16 times across it. The very least they could do is give the artist's name and say, maybe for more information on the creation of this piece, they could even use that as a selling point. Like, hey, here's some tutorials that you can check out to inspire you on how to use these materials. A lot of companies could not possibly understand. Like, when I used to do hands-on creativity, sometimes I would be partnered with other art supply manufacturers. And the reps that I talked to, some of them 100% got it, but most of them were not artists, did not mess around with the art supplies, did not understand how artists think, did not understand how artists buy materials. Like, I don't even understand why they were working for an art supply company in the first place, because it's like, why? It's just another thing to sell for them, and they weren't even interested in the end consumer. And this is not like 10 years ago. This is like right before the pandemic. So I'm not convinced that those attitudes have really changed. But as an artist, I want to know who made the artwork on the package. I want to watch a tutorial on how this piece was created so I can learn how to use these materials. I want to be able to get these effects with this set without having to do a bunch of external legwork to figure it out. I don't mean as good, but I want to get some of these basic techniques down. And I want companies to be more honest with me. If a piece was made using just those materials, that's fine. But if you're introducing something other than pencils, erasers, and like and the paper, like very common, one can assume you use those in addition to this materials. I want to know what those materials are, because if I'm buying this set and I see this art, I should be able to get those lights and get those darks with the set here. I think that is a safe and fair assumption. So that is a big pet peeve of mine. I've talked about it on the channel from time to time, here and there. I try not to make it like the hobby horse that I'm going to ride into battle, even though it does bother me. Because I know you guys get where I'm coming from and you probably don't want to hear it. But I feel like I was a little bit duped because I thought I would be able to get this contrast and I can't, at least not from these. So with the Schmincke, I could get that kind of contrast because not only can I get those really dark darks, but unlike with these, which are Inktense based, I can lift it up with a little bit of scrubbing with a brush and a paper towel and get those lights back in if I want them. And that's what I'm looking for. So I feel like there's a little bit of deceptive packaging at play, perhaps. It does make me a little bit uncomfortable because I do feel like what they show in the package should be representative of what the contents can actually do, or it should be very clear that they've brought in additional materials. Because often things like this are not necessarily purchased by the artists themselves, but they're given as a gift. And particularly they're given to people who might not have a large stash of art supplies or a newer artist. And I feel like you're kind of setting them up for failure and disappointment. So I feel like that's an area that many art supply companies, not just Derwent, could be working on. And I don't usually mention this when I'm reviewing really cheap stuff from AliExpress because, you know, frankly, I feel like that stuff's cheap enough. They're not really accounting for all the extra money it takes to hire an artist and record tutorials and all that. However, this was a $30 set. And while that's not like earth-shatteringly expensive, Inktense itself, the India ink, those are not particularly expensive. And the charcoal is not particularly expensive. And it's reusing the same packaging that they're using for all the paint sets. So that's also not particularly expensive. So I think if they can pay someone to generate art or work with an artist to generate art, then the least they can do is have like a QR code or a URL where we could watch them actually make this piece of art and we could see how they use these charcoal-based watercolors to do just that. So my final verdict is, if you're looking for charcoal-based watercolors, I would recommend the Schmincke watercolors over the Derwent watercolors, especially if you can get the little 5 milliliter tubes. So one 5 milliliter tube, you can get about 3 half pan full pours with this. So you're already, you know, getting some refillability. No, it doesn't have the same color range, but it is not being tinted with outside. Now, what would be pretty, what would be cool is if maybe we did a charcoal plus line where they did have charcoal as the additive and then they added some other color, like other pigments. So kind of like the Van Gogh Dusk colors, except that's using PBK 11, which is like a super granulating black. If they were to use these charcoals with something that's colored but also very able to lift to give us that kind of tinted nuance, that would be really cool. And more along these lines if you were looking for something like that. But you could probably mix something like that at home very easily, like with ultramarine blue or yellow ochre or Venetian red, just colors that are already very granulating and thus more prone to lifting, could give you a very similar effect. But basically, I would recommend you go ahead and go with the Schmincke set or the Schmincke charcoal colors over the Derwent tinted charcoal colors. That's just my recommendation though. There are a lot of other water soluble charcoal products out there on the market. So let me know if you guys have a favorite, if there's something that you think I should try out, if it just blows the Schmincke stuff out of the water, let me know. And hopefully you guys found this helpful, useful, and informative. And at the very least, I hope you guys were able to decide what you needed to decide about this product and make your purchasing decisions accordingly. So I should probably stop buying these Derwent paint pan sets because I haven't really liked any of them. At least with the Derwent Inktense one though, I could see how other people might like it. It just wasn't for me. But with the Graphiton and with the charcoal set, I was just hugely underwhelmed with both of them. So I say that, but I'm probably gonna buy the pastel set at some point. So there you go. However, I was really happy with the Schmincke Kohl watercolors. And I mean, who's surprised by that when a lot of watercolor is, especially black watercolor, is made using like carbon black or ivory black or some other charcoal-esque product. It actually makes a lot of sense now that I actually think about it. So what's to like about the Schmincke? Well, they can set up in half pans and reconstitute, which is a big deal for me. They look super duper dry, but they do actually reconstitute. You can get some really nice color saturation out of them. Let me grab my swatch sheets. So, as you guys remember, these are the Schmincke ones. These are fresh from the tube. These are after they've dried for a week. Now, let's compare that to the Derwent ones. Just not a lot of anything. Like, they just couldn't get dark enough for me. I just wasn't really able to achieve something that looks like charcoal. It looked more like graphite. So I was really, really underwhelmed with the Derwent tinted charcoal paint pan set. But fortunately, Schmincke kind of redeemed the whole thing for me. But I would be curious to hear what you guys think. Do you like the Derwent tinted charcoal paint pan set? Does it work for you? That is a mouthful of a name. Okay, I have to keep checking the name every time I say it. So that's also like not super great. Usually they come up with like kind of catchy names, but no. So did you like it? Did you have better experiences than I did? Were you able to get more saturated colors? Do you disagree with me in the thought that artists should be credited for the art that they make, even when it's used on packaging? Because when we're talking about art supplies, shouldn't we be celebrating the artist? Like, do you feel differently? I know that's like a hot button one. Other artists typically agree. People who work in marketing often don't agree. I have not yet heard an argument against crediting the artist that I'm like, yeah, I can see that, specifically when it comes to art supplies. I don't necessarily, I would love to see artists credited on like everything we do, whether it's cards, puzzles, children's toys. Like, I think that would be phenomenal, but that's not a thing. And while I would love for that to change, I do kind of, especially for like big corporations like Lego and Disney, I do understand why they don't. But when it comes to art supplies, I can't wrap my hand around it. I don't agree. So I'd be interested in hearing somebody present a really good argument why we shouldn't credit the artists when it comes to art supply packaging. But, you know, you are arguing with an artist, so I do have a vested interest in seeing us getting fairly credited and thus maybe fairly paid, and also maybe finding more work. Do you like them? Am I just missing the mark, or are they terrible and I was just late to the party? Obviously, let me know very gently in the comments below. If you found today's two-part review to be helpful, useful, and informative, then maybe consider subscribing, sticking around, hanging out with me. I update twice a week, so if you're not seeing notifications from YouTube that I've updated, then maybe you should check your notifications because they might not actually be turned on. But anyway, I hope you guys found this helpful, useful, and informative. I had fun hanging out with you guys, even if I did not love everything about it and I felt like this was a waste of my money. That happens sometimes. That's why I review the art supplies, so that you don't have to, so that you can just get the cream of the crop instead of the crap of the crop. Anyway, I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative for you guys, and hopefully this will help you guys make art a habit. So huge thanks for my patrons. As always, they are the sponsors of this channel outside of my comic, 7-Inch Kara, and without their support, this would not be possible. I would have thrown in the towel years ago, because those numbers are not, I'm not making that mad YouTube money, and that's okay, because I've got amazing patrons whose names you guys will see